9 years of being invisible. That's what Sophie felt as she sat in her wheelchair, watching fathers twirl their daughters across the gym floor. 9 years of being overlooked, forgotten, alone. Until the janitor knelt in front of her. "Your turn, princess." Sophie's breath caught. "But I can't dance. Nobody—" Her voice broke. "Nobody ever picks me." "I'm picking you," Blake said, his hand steady and sure. "Right here, right now." His daughter, Skylar, stepped up beside Sophie. "We both are." Sophie's hands trembled as she looked around, at the staring faces, at the girl offering friendship, at the man who finally saw her. She didn't know her mother was standing in the doorway watching. She didn't know this moment would change their lives forever. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. 3 weeks earlier, Blake pushed his janitor's cart through the empty cafeteria, the smell of industrial cleaner mixing with leftover lunch odors. It was 1:15 p.m. The lunch period had ended 15 minutes ago. The cafeteria should have been empty. But it wasn't. In the far corner, near the windows overlooking the playground, where children's laughter drifted through the glass, sat a girl in a wheelchair. She was maybe 9 or 10, blonde hair falling like a curtain as she bent over a sketchbook. Completely still, completely alone.
Blake stopped. He'd been working at Brightline Elementary for months now, ever since his engineering career imploded and single fatherhood forced him to take whatever stable job came with health insurance. He'd learned to be invisible, to clean around the edges of other people's lives without drawing attention to his fall from professional grace. But something about this scene felt wrong. He approached slowly, his shoes squeaking on the linoleum. "Hey there, you okay?" The girl looked up, startled. Her eyes were bright blue, intelligent, but there was something resigned in them that no child should carry. "Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm fine." "The cafeteria closed 15 minutes ago." Blake glanced around. "Where's your teacher, your aide?" "Mrs. Patterson had an emergency. She'll be back soon." The girl's voice was matter-of-fact, rehearsed. "Everyone forgets I'm here sometimes." The casualness of that statement hit Blake like a punch to the chest. Blake pulled out a chair, sitting at her eye level. "I'm Blake. I work here. What's your name?" "Sophie." She gestured at her sketchbook filled with intricate butterfly drawings. "I was just finishing this monarch. Did you know they migrate thousands of miles?" "I didn't know that." Blake leaned closer, genuinely impressed by the detail in her artwork. "These are incredible, Sophie. You're really talented." Something shifted in Sophie's expression, maybe surprise that someone was actually looking at her work instead of just her wheelchair. "Thanks. Most people don't notice." "Well, I'm noticing. That shading is professional level." They talked for another 10 minutes about budflies and migration patterns and the difference between monarchs and painted ladies, until Mrs. Patterson rushed back in, apologizing profusely for leaving Sophie behind during a bathroom emergency with another student. As Blake watched them leave, Sophie glanced back over her shoulder and smiled. Small, uncertain, but real.
That night, lying in his cramped apartment after putting his daughter Skylar to bed, Blake couldn't stop thinking about those words. "Everyone forgets I'm here sometimes." He knew that feeling. After his wife Sarah died in that hotel fire in Chicago 3 years ago, after the insurance money barely covered funeral costs, after his engineering firm downsized him out of a job, Blake had become invisible too. The professional colleagues who'd once respected him didn't return his calls. The neighbors who'd attended backyard barbecues suddenly found reasons to cross the street. Being invisible was a special kind of loneliness. The next day, Blake found Sophie in the courtyard during lunch, sitting away from the picnic tables where other kids clustered. Her wheelchair was positioned under a tree, her sketchbook open, drawing butterflies while voices and laughter happened around her but never included her. Blake had packed an extra sandwich. "Mind if I join you? The teacher's lounge smells like burnt coffee and broken dreams." Sophie laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Only if you want to hear about butterfly metamorphosis, that's exactly what I want to hear about. It became their routine. Every day during his lunch break, Blake would sit with Sophie. He learned that she had cerebral palsy affecting her legs but not her sharp mind. He learned that she loved science and art, that she wanted to be a marine biologist when she grew up, that her mother ran some big tech company and worked constantly. Mom's the CEO of White Technologies, Sophie mentioned one afternoon, tracing the outline of a swallowtail butterfly. She's really important, meetings all over the world. I'm sure she's very proud of you. Sophie's pencil paused. She is. She tells me that, but she's always on.
Blake understood that too. After Sarah died, he'd buried himself in work, thinking if he just provided for Skylar, that would be enough. Until the night his daughter asked him if he was sad because she wasn't a good enough daughter to make him happy. That's when he realized that presence mattered more than provision. "Tell me more about these butterflies," Blake said, changing the subject. Over the next 2 weeks, Blake looked forward to those lunch conversations more than he wanted to admit. Sophie was brilliant, funny, and carried a wisdom that came from being overlooked. She'd learned to observe people the way scientists observe specimens, seeing patterns, understanding motivations, reading the room from her position at its edges. Blake told her about Skylar, about how his daughter loved soccer but hated math. "You're a good dad," Sophie said one day, out of nowhere. "What makes you say that?" "Because you see people, really see them. Not everyone does that." Blake smiled, but his heart ached for this kid who'd spent so much of her life being unseen that she recognized the gift of attention. He didn't know it yet, but that gift was about to change everything. The poster appeared on the cafeteria bulletin board on a Monday morning. Father-daughter dance, Friday, October 18th. Blake saw it while emptying trash cans and immediately thought of Skylar. She'd been talking about it for weeks, planning her dress, practicing her dance moves in their living room. "Daddy, you're going to dance with me, right? Everyone's dad is coming." "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Skybug." But that afternoon, when Blake sat down with Sophie for lunch, he immediately noticed something was wrong. Her sandwich sat closed, her sketchbook closed, her eyes red-rimmed. "Hey, butterfly girl, what's going on?" Sophie tried to smile, but it wobbled. "Nothing, I'm fine." "Sophie?" She let out a shaky breath. "The father-daughter dance is Friday." "Yeah, Skylar's been talking my ear off about it. My mom hired someone to take me, a professional aide, someone who will push my chair around the dance floor while I sit there like," she trailed off, her voice thick with unshed tears, "like a doll, like someone's charity project." Blake's chest tightened. "Where's your mom?" "Tokyo. Big merger meeting. She can't make it back in time." Sophie picked at the edge of her sketchbook. "It's fine. I'm used to it. At least I'll be there, right? That's something." Blake looked at this girl, this brilliant, kind, funny girl who'd spent her entire life settling for crumbs when she deserved the whole feast. He thought about Skylar, so excited about the dance. He thought about Sophie, who'd spend the evening being wheeled around by a stranger while watching real fathers dance with their daughters. He made a decision. "Sophie, I have a proposition for you." She looked up, curious. "What if you came with me and Skylar? It's friends. 3's a party, right? We'd love to have you join us." Sophie's eyes widened. But I can't really dance, and wouldn't Skylar mind sharing you?" "Let me worry about Skylar. You just bring those butterfly drawings to show her. She loves art." "Blake, I don't want to be anyone's pity project." "This isn't pity," Blake interrupted gently. "This is friendship. You've spent 2 weeks telling me about butterfly metamorphosis and listening to me complain about broken faucets. That's what friends do. They show up for each other." Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were different tears. "You really mean that?" "I really mean that. What do you say?" Yes, I'd love to come with you." That evening, Blake sat Skylar down at their kitchen table, nervous about her reaction. 7-year-olds could be possessive about their parents, especially kids who'd already lost one. "Skybug, I want to talk to you about something. You know the father-daughter dance on Friday?" Skylar nodded enthusiastically. "I'm wearing my purple dress." "Great." "So, there's a girl at school named Sophie. She draws the most amazing butterflies I've ever seen, and she's really nice and funny. But she doesn't have anyone to take her to the dance. Her mom has to work. So I was thinking, what if Sophie came with us? The 3 of us could go together."
Blake held his breath, waiting for disappointment or jealousy. Instead, Skylar's face lit up like Christmas morning. Sophie who? Sits by the big tree? The one with the wheelchair who draws all the pretty pictures? Yeah, that's her. She's so cool. I've always wanted to talk to her, but I didn't know if I should. Can she really come with us? Can she teach me to draw butterflies? Relief flooded through Blake. I think she'd love that. This is the best dance ever! Skylar bounced in her chair. I'm going to make her a friendship bracelet. What's her favorite color? I don't know, actually. I'll make one with all the colors then. As Skylar ran off to her room to start crafting, Blake felt something shift in his chest. Pride, maybe. Or hope. Maybe he was doing something right after all. Friday approached quickly. Blake pressed his one decent button-down shirt, polished his worn dress shoes, and tried not to think about how he'd look next to all the fathers in expensive suits. Pride was a luxury he'd given up 3 years ago. Tonight wasn't about him. It was about 2 little girls who deserved to dance. On Friday evening, Blake and Skylar pulled up to Sophie's house.
House was an understatement. The white residence was a sprawling estate with a circular driveway, marble columns, and a fountain that probably cost more than Blake made in a year. His beat-up Honda Civic looked embarrassingly out of place. Wow, Skylar breathed. It's like a castle. It's just a house, Skybug. Sophie lives here. She's still our friend. Blake rang the doorbell, and a professional-looking woman in scrubs answered. Presumably the aide Brianna White had hired. Hello, the woman looked confused. Can I help you? I'm Blake Bennett. I'm here to pick up Sophie for the father-daughter dance. Oh, there must be some confusion. Mrs. White arranged for me to accompany Sophie. Plans changed, Blake said firmly but politely. Sophie's coming with friends tonight. Is she ready? The aide hesitated, then called inside. Sophie, there's someone here for you? Sophie wheeled into view, and Blake's heart squeezed. She wore a flowing purple dress that made her look like a princess, her blonde hair curled and clipped back with butterfly barrettes. Her face glowed with nervous excitement. You came? She whispered, as if she'd half expected him not to show up. I always keep my promises, butterfly girl. Skylar stepped forward, holding out a bracelet woven from purple, blue, and pink threads. I made you this. We're going to have so much fun. Sophie's eyes filled with tears as Skylar fastened the bracelet around her wrist. Thank you. I love it. Your chair is so cool, Skylar continued, examining the wheels. Can I push you to the car? Sure. The gymnasium at Brightline Elementary had been transformed with twinkling string lights, paper stars hanging from the ceiling, and a DJ playing upbeat pop music. Fathers in suits and ties spun their daughters across the floor, laughter and music filling the space. Blake immediately felt out of place in his pressed but faded shirt and cheap tie. Several dads glanced at him, then at Sophie's wheelchair, expressions ranging from curiosity to that particular brand of pity that made his skin crawl. But Sophie didn't notice. She was too busy taking in the decorations, the music, the magic of it all. This is beautiful, she breathed. Skylar wheeled Sophie toward the refreshment table, both girls giggling over the punch bowl shaped like a glass slipper. Blake hung back, watching them interact with the ease of children who didn't see wheelchairs or differences, just potential friends. When the DJ announced the first father-daughter dance, Blake's stomach knotted. This was the moment of truth. He approached both girls. All right, ladies, Skybug, you're up first. Blake took Skylar's hand and led her onto the floor. The song was something sweet and slow, and he spun his daughter in gentle circles, making her laugh when he dipped her dramatically. For those 3 minutes, the world narrowed to just him and his little girl, to her joy and trust and love. When the song ended, Skylar hugged him tight. Best dad ever! Right back at you, best daughter ever. Then Blake turned to Sophie, who sat at the edge of the dance floor, watching with an expression that tried to be happy, but couldn't quite hide the longing. Blake knelt beside her wheelchair, meeting her eyes. Your turn, princess. Sophie's breath caught. But I can't. Trust me. He'd practiced this. After Sophie accepted his invitation, Blake had spent hours watching videos online, figuring out how to make this work. He positioned himself behind Sophie's wheelchair, and Skylar moved to Sophie's side, taking her hand. "Ready, Blake?" asked. Sophie nodded, not trusting her voice. Blake began to wheel Sophie across the floor in graceful, sweeping arcs, timing his movements to the music. Skylar walked beside them, holding Sophie's hand and spinning in small circles. Other dancers paused to watch, but Blake didn't care. Then he moved to face Sophie, took both her hands gently, and showed her how to move her arms in rhythm with the music, while he swayed her chair in gentle patterns. Skylar joined in, and suddenly Sophie was dancing with her upper body, her face transforming from uncertainty to pure, radiant joy.
"I'm dancing," Sophie gasped, her voice breaking with emotion. "I'm really dancing." The song shifted to something more upbeat, and Blake spun the wheelchair in careful turns while both girls laughed. Other children began to gather around, not with pity, but with genuine interest. "Cool moves, Sophie," a boy called out. "Can I dance with you guys?" a girl in a sparkly dress asked. "Yes," Sophie said, and soon a circle formed around them, children moving together, inclusion replacing isolation. Blake looked down at Sophie's face, flushed with happiness, eyes bright with tears and laughter, finally being seen, and felt something crack open in his chest. This was what mattered. Not engineering degrees or corner offices or professional success. This moment, this joy, this simple act of showing up. The music swelled, the children cheered, and Sophie threw her arms around Blake's neck, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me." Blake hugged her back, his vision blurring. "Thank you for letting me." None of them noticed the woman standing in the gymnasium's doorway, still wearing a business suit from her flight, her phone hanging forgotten at her side, tears streaming down her face as she watched a stranger give her daughter what all her billions never could. Brianna White had just finished a week of back-to-back business meetings across America and was on her private jet, an hour into her flight to Tokyo for her biggest merger, when her phone rang. Sophie's aide was calling to inform her that Sophie had gone to the dance with the school janitor. The school janitor! Brianna's first instinct was panic, then anger. Who was this man? Why had Sophie gone with him? She'd paid good money for professional care, for someone qualified to handle Sophie's needs. She'd canceled the Tokyo merger, forfeited a billion-dollar deal without second thought, and asked the pilot to turn the jet around. 2 hours later, she arrived at the school, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios and prepared confrontations. The guilt of missing the dance entirely had been eating her alive for weeks. But this was unacceptable. Nobody touched her daughter without authorization. Except when Brianna reached the gymnasium doors and looked inside, the angry words died in her throat. There was Sophie, her Sophie, dancing. Not being pushed around the floor by a paid professional, not sitting on the sidelines watching. Actually dancing, her arms moving in rhythm, her face glowing with a happiness Brianna hadn't seen in years, maybe ever. And the man making it happen wasn't some predator or opportunist. He was a father, clearly working class in his worn clothing, moving Sophie's wheelchair with such gentle care, such natural joy, as if this was the most important thing he'd ever do. Another little girl, his daughter presumably, dancing beside them, holding Sophie's hand, laughing together like they'd been friends forever. Other children circled around them, drawn not by pity, but by the pure magnetism of joy. Sophie was the center of attention, but not in the way that made Brianna's heart ache, not as the special needs kid. Just as a girl at a dance, having the time of her life. Brianna's carefully constructed composure shattered. When was the last time she'd seen Sophie laugh like that? When was the last time she'd been present enough to notice what made her daughter happy? She couldn't remember, and that realization broke something inside her. Brianna White had built an empire. She'd turned a startup into a multi-billion-dollar company. She had negotiated with world leaders and won. She could command a boardroom with a single look and bend markets to her will. But she couldn't give her own daughter what this janitor, this stranger, had given her in 3 weeks, the simple gift of being seen.
The song ended, and Sophie threw her arms around the man's neck, saying something Brianna couldn't hear but could read in the gratitude radiating from her daughter's entire body. That's when Sophie spotted her. "Mommy!" Sophie's face lit up even more. "Mommy, you came! Look, I'm dancing!" Every head in the gymnasium turned toward Brianna. She was suddenly aware of the spectacle she made. Still in her designer business suit, diamond earrings catching the light, an expensive perfume clinging to her. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who belonged in boardrooms, not school dances. But she moved toward her daughter anyway, her heels clicking on the gymnasium floor, the crowd parting before her the way crowds always did for people with money and power. Up close, the janitor was younger than she'd expected. Mid-30s maybe, with kind brown eyes and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. He straightened when he saw her, his expression shifting to something between apology and defiance.
"Ms. White," he said quietly, "I apologize if I overstepped. Sophie mentioned you couldn't make it, and I just thought—" "You thought my daughter deserved to dance," Brianna interrupted, her voice cracking despite her attempt at control. "You thought she deserved more than a paid companion. You thought—" She looked at Sophie, radiant and happy. "You thought she deserved to be just a little girl at a dance." The janitor, Blake, the aide had said his name was Blake, met her eyes. "Every child deserves that." Brianna felt tears threatening again, right here in front of everyone. She, who never cried at negotiations or setbacks, who prided herself on composure, was falling apart in a middle school gymnasium. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "No thanks necessary. Sophie's a great kid." Sophie wheeled forward, grabbing Brianna's hand. "Mom, this is Blake. He has lunch with me every day. And this is Skylar. She's my new best friend." Every day. He had lunch with Sophie every day. And Brianna didn't even know. Didn't know her daughter ate lunch alone. Didn't know this man had been showing up for her child while she was halfway around the world closing deals. The shame was suffocating. Brianna knelt down, difficult in her pencil skirt and heels, and looked at Sophie properly. Really looked at her. At the purple dress she'd chosen herself, at the butterfly barrettes Brianna had never seen before, at the friendship bracelet on her wrist, at the pure joy in her eyes. "You look beautiful, baby," Brianna said. "I'm so sorry I almost missed this." "But you're here now," Sophie said, and her forgiveness was immediate, unconditional. "That's what matters?" Is it, Brianna thought? Or is it too little too late? She stood, turning back to Blake. Words tumbled out before she could think them through. Would you and Skylar join us for dinner this weekend? Please, I'd like to properly thank you. And she glanced at Sophie, who looked hopeful. I'd like to get to know the people who've been there for my daughter when I wasn't." Blake hesitated, his eyes dropping to his worn shoes, clearly uncomfortable with her wealth and gratitude. But then he looked at Sophie's hopeful face and Skylar's excited expression and nodded. "We'd be honored." As the dance continued and Brianna watched Blake spin both girls around the floor again, she realized something fundamental had shifted tonight. She'd spent years building a fortress of success around her and Sophie, believing money could solve everything. But this janitor had walked through all her defenses with nothing but kindness and presence. And Brianna suddenly wanted to learn how he did it. Saturday evening arrived with the weight of expectation. Blake and Skylar stood at the front door of the White estate, both dressed in their Sunday best, which still looked painfully modest against the marble and gold. "Remember, it's just a house," Blake murmured to Skylar, as the massive oak door swung open. But walking into the foyer with its chandelier and sweeping staircase made Blake's stomach churn with inadequacy. This was a mistake. What was he thinking, bringing his daughter into this world of wealth he could never provide? Sophie wheeled into view, beaming. "You're here! Come on! Mom made her famous lasagna. Well, the chef made it, but Mom helped." Dinner was served in a formal dining room that could seat 20, though they gathered at one end of the long table. The food was excellent, the conversation polite, but Blake felt the strain of being in a world where he didn't belong. Brianna had changed from her business suit into casual clothes, jeans and a sweater, but she still carried an air of command that made Blake hyper-aware of his own rough edges. After dinner, Brianna suggested the girls play in Sophie's room while she and Blake had coffee. The suggestion felt orchestrated, deliberate. In the sitting room, Brianna poured coffee from a silver service with hands that trembled slightly.
Blake sat in a leather armchair that probably cost more than his monthly rent, watching her struggle with composure. Finally, she spoke. "I want to apologize." "For what?" "For not being there. For hiring someone to take Sophie instead of—" her voice cracked, "instead of moving heaven and earth to be there myself." "You were working, providing for her." "No." Brianna's voice was sharp, angry at herself. "I was hiding, behind mergers and meetings and conference calls. Because it's easier to throw money at Sophie's needs than to sit with the fact that I can't fix her, that no amount of success or wealth will make her walk." She set down the coffee pot with a clatter, finally looking at Blake with raw honesty. "Do you know what I realized last night? Sophie asked Skylar about her favorite things, favorite color, favorite food, favorite song. And Skylar knew every answer. They've spent, 3 hours together total, and your daughter knows Sophie better than I do." Blake stayed quiet, sensing she needed to work through this. "I didn't know Sophie's favorite color was purple until last night." "Purple? She's worn it to every therapy appointment for 3 years, and I never noticed because I was always on my phone, always somewhere else even when I was right there." She looked up at Blake, her carefully crafted CEO persona completely gone, just a lost mother reaching for understanding. "When Sophie showed me her butterfly journal earlier, she told me she fills it during lunch because she doesn't have anyone to sit with. I didn't even know she ate lunch alone every day. I ask her about school, and she says fine, and I accept it because I'm relieved I don't have to dig deeper." Brianna's hands clenched into fists. "I'm her mother. I'm supposed to be her whole world, and instead, a kind man who barely knows her has given her more joy in 3 weeks than I have in months. What does that say about me?" Blake moved from his chair to sit beside her on the sofa, suddenly not caring about the difference in their circumstances. Pain was pain, regardless of wealth. "It says you're human," he said gently. "It says you're scared." "Terrified," Brianna whispered. Blake thought carefully before speaking. 3 years ago, I lost my wife. Hotel fire in Chicago during a conference. Faulty wiring. Random, senseless tragedy. For months afterward, I threw myself into work, trying to outrun the grief. I thought if I just provided for Skylar, that would be enough. He paused, the memory still sharp. But one night, she asked me if I was sad because she wasn't a good enough daughter to make me happy. Brianna gasped softly. "That's when I realized," Blake continued, "that she didn't need a provider. She needed a dad who was present, who saw her. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, choosing to be fully present when grief was eating me alive. But it's also the best thing I've ever done." "How do I start?" Brianna whispered. "How do I fix this?" "You don't fix it. You just start showing up. Tomorrow. And the day after. Small steps." They sat in silence for a moment, then Brianna said quietly, "Would you help me?" Blake met her eyes. "Help you how?" "Not with Sophie's care. I have excellent people for that. But with learning how to see her, how to be present. I'm good at running companies, terrible at being a mom, and you're good at this, at seeing people. Would you teach me?" It was an odd request from a billionaire CEO to a janitor, but Blake saw past the wealth and power to the scared mother underneath and nodded. "Yeah, I can do that." Relief flooded Brianna's face. "Thank you. I'll pay you." "No." Blake's voice was firm. "This isn't a transaction. Friends help friends. That's it." Brianna smiled through tears. "Friends. I'd like that." What neither of them knew was that their friendship would become something more, something that would challenge both of them to grow in ways they never expected. But for now, they were just two people learning to do better by the children they loved. Over the following months, Blake's lunch breaks expanded. He'd pick up Sophie from school along with Skylar, bringing both girls to the park while Brianna left work early. Just 1 hour initially, but it was a start. Blake taught Brianna the small things. How to really listen when Sophie talked about her day, asking follow-up questions instead of immediately offering solutions or fixing problems. How to let Sophie struggle with tasks instead of rushing to help, giving her the dignity of trying. How to be okay with silence, just sitting together without filling every moment with productivity.
She told me today that monarch butterflies can migrate 3,000 miles, Brianna said one evening at the park, wonder in her voice. And I actually listened. I asked questions. We spent an hour just talking, and I wasn't thinking about work once. That's huge, Blake said warmly, watching the girls feed ducks at the pond. It's not enough, Brianna replied, but there was determination in her voice now rather than defeat. But it's a start. The changes didn't happen overnight. Some days, Brianna slipped back into old patterns, arriving home late with apologies and guilt. But slowly, incrementally, Sophie's face began to light up more. She started sharing stories unprompted. She asked her mother to help with homework. The distance between them began to close, inch by precious inch. Blake and Brianna saw each other regularly now, always with the girls, always as friends. But something else was growing too, something neither wanted to acknowledge. It started small. The way Brianna's laugh made Blake's chest feel warm. The way Blake's steady presence made Brianna feel less alone. How their conversations stretched longer about everything and nothing until the girls would remind them it was time to go home. 4 months after the dance, Blake arrived to pick up Sophie for a park playdate and found Brianna in jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual power suit.
"I took the afternoon off," she said, almost defensively. "Thought I'd come to the park too." At the park, Blake pushed both girls on the swings while Brianna watched, laughing at their demands to go higher. When Sophie wanted to feed the ducks, Brianna was the one who tore up the bread, who crouched at wheelchair level, pointing out mallards and wood ducks. "You're really good at this now," Blake said softly as they walked behind the girls. "I'm learning," Brianna replied, then more quietly, "from a very good teacher." Their hands brushed as they walked, and both pulled away, as if burned. The attraction was undeniable, but so were the walls between them. Brianna started, then stopped. Never mind. But Blake knew. He felt it too, the pull toward this brilliant, wounded woman who was fighting so hard to be better, and it terrified him. The tension built over weeks, lingering glances, conversations that felt too intimate for just friendship. The way Brianna's face lit up when Blake arrived, and how Blake found himself thinking about her at odd moments during the day. 6 months after the dance, they were in Brianna's kitchen after the girls fell asleep during a movie. Blake stood to leave, but Brianna's voice stopped him. "Stay. For coffee. Just stay." They sat at the kitchen island, and the conversation drifted from the girls to their own lives, their losses and fears. "I haven't been on a date since my wife died. Couldn't imagine letting anyone else into the life we'd built. I haven't dated since Sophie's father left. Couldn't imagine anyone wanting the complicated package we came in." Their eyes met, and the truth hung between them, unspoken, but obvious. Blake stood abruptly. "This is crazy. You're a billionaire CEO. I'm a janitor. We live in different worlds."
I know, Brianna whispered. "People would think I'm after your money, that I'm using you." "I know. And you'd always wonder if that's true, if I'd want you without all this." He gestured at the mansion around them. Brianna's eyes flashed with hurt. "Would you?" "That's not fair," Blake said, his voice rising. "You're the one who's always one phone call away from flying to Tokyo. I'm the guy who mops floors. This can't work." "Then why does it feel like it could?" Brianna stood too, her voice rising to match his. "Why do I look forward to seeing you more than anything else in my day? Why does Sophie ask about you constantly? Why does every moment feel easier when you're around?" "Because we're friends," Blake said firmly, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is that really all this is?" Brianna stepped closer, close enough that Blake could smell her perfume, see the vulnerability in her eyes. Blake's jaw tightened. "It has to be. For everyone's sake." He left that night, and for 2 weeks they kept their distance. Blake would pick up Sophie for play dates but barely made eye contact with Brianna. She dropped Sophie off with a polite smile, her walls back up. The girls noticed immediately. "Why doesn't Miss Brianna come to the park anymore?" Skylar asked one evening. "She's busy with work, sweetheart." But the distance felt wrong, incomplete. Both Blake and Brianna found themselves reaching for their phones, then setting them down, missing the easy conversation, the shared laughter, the sense of being understood. It was Sophie who finally forced the issue. "Do you like my mom, Blake? Do you like my mom?" That conversation haunted Blake. And that night, after putting Skylar to bed, he made a decision. Blake drove to Rihanna's office downtown, still in his janitor's uniform, his heart hammering against his ribs. The receptionist looked startled when he asked to see Miss White, but made the call. When Brianna saw him standing in her glass-walled office overlooking the city, her face showed surprise, then hope, then fear. "Blake, what's wrong? Is Sophie okay?" "Sophie's fine, but we need to talk." Brianna dismissed her assistant and closed the door. "Okay." Blake paced, running his hands through his hair. "This is insane. I'm standing in your office in a janitor's uniform about to say something that could ruin the best friendship I've had in years." "Blake, let me finish." He stopped, facing her. "I'm terrified of this, of you, of what people will think, of screwing up our daughter's friendship, of not being enough for someone like you. I've been hiding behind excuses about our different worlds because it's safer than admitting the truth." "What truth?" Brianna whispered. "That I'm falling for you," Blake said, his voice raw. "That I think about you constantly, that I want to be the person you call when you're struggling, not just the friend who shows up for playdates. That the idea of you with someone else makes me physically ill." Brianna's eyes filled with tears. "But I need you to know that I don't care about your money. I don't want your empire or your mansion. I want late-night conversations in the kitchen and watching our girls play together and fighting over whose turn it is to do the dishes. I want the real you, Brianna, the one who's learning to be present, who laughs at terrible jokes, who loves her daughter so fiercely it hurts." "Blake," Brianna moved toward him, but he held up a hand. "I need you to be sure, because I come with limitations. I can't buy you diamonds or take you to fancy restaurants. I'm a janitor rebuilding his life. If you choose me, you're choosing ordinary days and modest means. Can you live with that?" Brianna closed the distance between them, taking his calloused hands in her manicured ones. "Do you know what I see when I look at you? Not a janitor. I see a man who gave up everything for his daughter, who saw my invisible child and made her visible, who taught me how to be a mother again, who makes me laugh and challenges me to be better and doesn't care about my job title or my bank account." She reached up, touching his face gently. "I've dated billionaires and business titans. They were intimidated by my success or wanted to use it for themselves. You're the first man who's ever seen me, really seen me, and wanted me anyway, flaws and all. You make me feel like I'm enough, just as I am. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" "Brianna, I'm terrified too," she admitted. "Terrified you'll resent me for having more. Terrified I'll slip back into old patterns. Terrified this is too good to be true. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." Blake pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "This is going to be complicated." "Everything worth having is," Brianna murmured. When their lips met, it felt like coming home. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but real and right and full of promise. Drop a heart emoji if you're rooting for them. The relationship unfolded carefully over the following months. Blake struggled with the optics, showing up to school events with Brianna, watching people whisper and speculate. Brianna grappled with letting someone into her carefully controlled world, with being vulnerable, with trusting that Blake wouldn't leave like Sophie's father had. They had their first real fight 3 months into dating when Brianna tried to buy Blake a new car. "I don't need charity," Blake said, his jaw tight. "It's not charity. It's a gift from someone who cares about you." "A $40,000 gift. Brianna, I can't accept that." "Why not? I can afford it." "Because it makes me feel like a kept man, like I'm some project you're fixing. I have pride, Brianna." They'd stood on opposite sides of her living room, both breathing hard, both afraid they'd just broken something irreparable. Finally, Brianna spoke quietly. "I'm sorry. You're right. I overstepped. I'm used to solving problems with money. And I'm used to solving everything myself," Blake admitted. "But we're supposed to be partners. That means meeting in the middle." They learned each other's boundaries, their triggers, their love languages. Blake learned that Brianna showed love through acts of service. Brianna learned that Blake needed words of affirmation and quality time. 9 months into their relationship, Brianna found Blake at his kitchen table surrounded by papers, his head in his hands, engineering journals, resume drafts, rejection letters. "You're trying to get back into engineering," she said softly. "I was, but I've been out of the field for 3 years. My skills are outdated. No one wants a 36-year-old junior engineer." "Why didn't you tell me?"
Because what would you do? Use your connections? Get me a pity job? Blake's voice was sharp with frustration. I need to do this myself. Brianna was quiet for a long moment. Why did you really leave engineering? Blake's shoulders sagged. I failed. A year before Sarah died, I was the lead engineer on a bridge design. I missed a calculation. Small, but in engineering, small mistakes can be catastrophic. The error was caught in review, but I was demoted. My confidence was shot. His voice grew thick. Then Sarah died, and part of me was almost relieved to have an excuse to quit. I've been scared for 4 years, scared to trust myself, to believe I could be the engineer I once was. It's easier to mop floors than risk that kind of failure again. Brianna took his face in her hands. You made one mistake, one, and it was caught. No one was hurt. Blake, you're brilliant. The man who can engineer a way for a girl in a wheelchair to feel like she's dancing, that's not someone who should be mopping floors. What if I fail again? Then you fail, and you get back up. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy of success. Over the following weeks, Brianna coached Blake, not with connections or money, but with belief. She sat with him as he rewrote his resume, highlighting his adaptability, his attention to detail, his crisis management skills. 2 months later, Blake landed an interview with Henderson Engineering. When they asked why they should hire him, he said simply, "Because I understand now that engineering isn't about perfection. It's about care, attention, and the willingness to double-check, to ask for help, to put safety above ego. I lost sight of that once. I never will again." 3 weeks later, they offered him a position as a mid-level structural engineer. When Blake signed the contract, he cried. Not from sadness, but from the profound relief of reclaiming a part of himself he'd thought lost forever. That night, Brianna held him and whispered, "I'm so proud of you." "Thank you," Blake said, "for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's what partners do. We hold each other up."
20 months after their first father-daughter dance, Blake and Brianna were married in a simple outdoor ceremony in the garden of her estate. Sophie served as maid of honor, with her wheelchair beautifully decorated, and Skylar proudly stood as Blake's best woman. Both girls were emotional and thrilled to be part of the moment. Surrounded by friends and family, Blake and Brianna exchanged heartfelt vows, sealing their new life together as Sophie and Skylar cheered joyfully. 4 years after that life-changing dance, baby Lucas entered the world. At the hospital, Blake helped Sophie hold her baby brother, and Sophie laughed through tears. "Hi, Lucas. I'm your big sister, Sophie. This is your other big sister, Skylar. We're going to teach you everything about butterflies and dancing and how to be brave." Blake looked around at his family, his wife glowing despite exhaustion, his daughters cooing over their baby brother, the tiny infant who represented hope and new beginnings. We're all different people than we were. We've all transformed, like butterflies. Sophie looked up, beaming. "Exactly! We were all in cocoons, but we broke out together. We helped each other fly." As afternoon sun streamed through the hospital window, the Bennett White family sat together. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole. Because that's what families do. They transform together, they fly together, and they never, ever stop dancing. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please don't let it end here. Let it remind you, kindness still matters, compassion still changes lives, and hope is never wasted. Subscribe and be part of our Soul Lift Stories family, where every story lifts the spirit and reminds us that